My name is Naomi Carter, and I'm 28 years old. By the time my boyfriend told me to find someone else, I already had. Not in the way he meant, not in some messy, cheating, burn the world down kind of way. I mean, I had already started finding a version of myself that was getting harder to silence every time he rolled his eyes at me. Every time he sighed, like my voice was a problem. Every time he made me feel foolish for wanting the kind of relationship he used to claim he wanted too. When I first met Adrian, he had a way of making people feel chosen. He remembered little details, asked questions that sounded sincere, and laughed easily. For the first year, I thought I was lucky. I thought I had found one of those rare men who looked confident in public and still felt kind in private. Then something changed. Not all at once. That would have been easier to recognize. It happened slowly, in small humiliations I kept excusing because each one seemed too minor to build a case around. A dismissive look, a bored tone, a joke with a little edge on it, a shrug when I was clearly hurt. It was never dramatic enough to justify leaving in the moment, but over time it became its own pattern. Warmth turned into impatience. Impatience turned into contempt. By the end of it, every soft thing I did seemed to irritate him. We had been together for 3 years and living together for a year and a half. By then I felt less like his girlfriend and more like a system that kept his life running. I cooked, planned, reminded, adjusted, cleaned up, and kept the peace. He criticized, dismissed, and acted like my presence in our apartment was somehow both useful and exhausting. 2 months before I left, I planned a Thursday night dinner for us. Nothing fancy, just grilled salmon and the quinoa salad he used to love, back when eating with me still felt like something he enjoyed instead of something he tolerated. I lit one candle because the kitchen light was harsh and I wanted the room to feel softer than it had in weeks. When I heard his keys at the door, I actually had the stupid little hope that maybe the night would feel normal. He walked in, looked at the table, then at the plates, and made a face. "Seriously?" he said, dropping his bag near the couch. "This again?" "You used to love this," I said. "Yeah," he replied, already loosening his watch, already sounding bored. "When I was more basic, my taste has evolved." At first I thought he was joking. "Okay, what would you prefer?" He glanced at the food like it had personally offended him. "I don't know. Figure it out. You're the one who insists on these lame dinner dates." Lame. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. I set the serving spoon down and said as evenly as I could, "If you don't want to eat together, just say that." He was already scrolling through his phone. "Whatever. I'll order something." That was our pattern by then. I reached, he dismissed, and then I told myself not to be dramatic. The worst part wasn't even the fight. It was how ordinary it had become, how quickly I learned to clean up around the wound and keep moving. A month before that dinner, I had gone to my friend Dante's place to help him move furniture. That was where I met Caleb, a friend of his who was looking for a room because his lease situation had fallen through. He was easy to talk to, not flashy, not trying too hard, just relaxed and decent. The kind of person who asked how your week was and actually waited for the answer. A few other people were there too, talking over pizza boxes and half-built shelves, and I remember sitting on the arm of Dante's couch thinking, quietly, so this is what normal feels like. Not chemistry, not temptation, just people who liked being around each other. People who didn't treat kindness like weakness or conversation like labor. That same month, I joined a weekend hiking group after putting it off for ages. I told myself I needed something that belonged only to me. That was where I first started seeing Ethan around. We weren't close then, just familiar faces in the same circle, sometimes walking side by side for 10 minutes, sometimes trading a few easy words at the end of a trail. He had a calm kind of humor and a way of listening without trying to dominate the moment. At the time, I didn't think of it as anything important. I just noticed that talking to him felt uncomplicated. That night, after Dante's place, I came home to Adrian sprawled across the couch, one arm behind his head, shoes still on, the television loud enough to fill the room before I even stepped inside. He barely looked up. "Can you not stomp like that?" he said. "I'm trying to watch this." I looked down at my own feet. I had taken off my heels downstairs because my arches hurt. I was walking in socks. That was the moment something inside me went still. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't demand some giant relationship conversation in the living room. I just stood there with my bag on my shoulder and realized I was done offering softness to someone who treated it like clutter. After that, I stopped overperforming love for a man who had started consuming it like utility. I began looking for my own place quietly. At first, I was just browsing, comparing deposits, checking commute times, saving listings on my phone during lunch breaks. Then I started putting money aside more deliberately. I stopped planning special meals. I stopped asking if he wanted to do anything on weekends. I stopped filling every silence with one more attempt to reconnect. If he wanted a housemate he barely interacted with, fine, I could become one. At the same time, I started rebuilding the parts of my life that had shrunk around him. I went back to Dante's game nights. I kept showing up to the hiking group. I started saying yes when friends invited me somewhere instead of inventing reasons to go home early and maintain a relationship that only seemed to require maintenance from one person. The strange thing was, Adrian barely noticed. Of course he didn't. He was too busy with what he liked to call his upgraded life, which mostly meant expensive cocktails, loud places, and the constant company of Bianca, his favorite enabler. Bianca had a talent for making basic decency sound provincial, and Adrian loved performing for that audience. The breaking point came over something stupid. The dishwasher had broken again. I had handled the last 3 maintenance calls myself, coordinated with the landlord, waited around for repair people, and cleaned up afterward. So this time, while Adrian stood in the kitchen, opening a bottle of water and pretending not to see the puddle near the cabinets, I said, "Can you call the landlord this time? I handled it the last few times." He didn't even glance at the floor. Why is that my problem? Because you live here too. I don't have time for this, Naomi. I'm asking you to make one phone call. He exhaled like I had interrupted something important. God, you've been so needy lately. What's your deal? That word again. Needy. As if basic partnership were some embarrassing character flaw. My deal, I said, is that you treat me like an inconvenience. He laughed once, short and cold. Oh my God. Here we go. Poor little victim. I felt something in me sharpen. I'm serious. Your attitude toward me, toward us, is disrespectful. He leaned against the counter, annoyed now that I wasn't dropping it, and said the line that changed everything. Fine, if you don't like it, find someone else. There it was, that smug little power move, the line he expected to push me backward because he had already decided I would never really leave. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely calm. Already did, I said. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. He straightened. What? I held his gaze. I already did. I found someone else. His expression changed so quickly, it almost would have been funny if I hadn't been so tired. What the hell does that mean? It means I'm moving out next week. For a second, Adrian just stared at me, like I had spoken in a language he didn't recognize. Then he laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the idea itself didn't fit the version of me he had built in his head. You're joking. No. That single word landed harder than anything else I could have said. No explanation, no apology, no softening. His face shifted from confusion to irritation to something sharper. You're serious? I signed a lease last week. Movers are coming Saturday. That was the moment it hit him, though not in the way you might expect. Not emotionally, not as some heartbreaking realization that he was about to lose a woman he loved. It hit him logistically. You signed a lease without telling me? You told me to find someone else, I said. I took your advice. That's not what I meant. You should be more specific next time. His jaw tightened. You can't just decide to leave like that. I didn't just decide, I said. I planned. That word bothered him more than anything else. Planned meant intention. It meant this wasn't some impulsive meltdown he could dismiss later. It meant I had thought it through, quietly and carefully, without him. How long, he asked. About 6 weeks. The silence that followed wasn't disbelief anymore. It was offense. You've been pretending everything was fine while planning to leave me? I almost laughed. Adrian, when was the last time anything felt fine? For once, he didn't have an answer. That's not the point, he said eventually. You don't make a move like this without talking to me. Talking to you about what? So you could roll your eyes and tell me I was being dramatic? Or call it lame like everything else I tried to fix? That's not fair, isn't it? He tried a different angle. We're in a relationship, Naomi. You don't secretly plan to leave. Funny, I said. How now you remember that? I saw that one land. A brief flicker in his face. Gone almost immediately, but there. He turned away and dragged a hand through his hair like he needed to restart the scene on better terms. What about the apartment? Shouty asked. The rent, the bills. Our lease isn't up for 4 more months. I arranged a lease transfer. Dante's friend needs a place. The landlord approved it yesterday. He blinked. Wait, what? My half is covered. You won't be paying more. That's not the point, he snapped. It is a point, I said. One you don't have to worry about. That bothered him too. Every practical thing I had already solved removed one more piece of leverage. Which friend? He asked. Who's taking it? Caleb. He frowned, trying to place the name. That guy from Dante's place? Yes. And he's just moving in here? After I move out. His expression changed again. Jealousy slipped through, though not the loud, dramatic kind. Something quieter and more possessive. You like him? That's not what this is about. That's not what I asked. And I'm not answering a question that doesn't matter. It matters to me. I tilted my head. Since when? That hit harder than anything else in the conversation because it forced the truth into the room. His interest wasn't about me. It was about losing control. You think this is funny? He asked. No, I think it's overdue. He paced once across the kitchen. You've been planning this for 6 weeks and didn't say anything. What was I supposed to say? Hey, I'm slowly realizing you don't respect me, so I'm building an exit strategy. He didn't answer. I gave you chances, I said, quieter now. You just didn't notice them. That's not true. It is. Every dinner I planned, every conversation I tried to start, every time I asked you to show up a little differently, those were chances. He shook his head. You're twisting everything. No, I'm finally saying it out loud. Another silence followed, longer this time. He leaned back against the counter, but it didn't look casual anymore. It looked like he needed something solid behind him. So that's it? He asked. 3 years? And you're just done? Yes. The simplicity of that unsettled him. There was no chaos to push against, no dramatic scene to blame, just a clean decision. You're overreacting. Am I? Yes. Then why does it feel like you're the one panicking? That cracked something. Not completely, but enough. I'm not panicking. Okay. I'm just saying this is extreme. Or is it just inconvenient for you? His eyes narrowed. You're being cold. I almost smiled. I learned from the best. That silenced him for a second. Then he softened his tone, as if he could still steer the conversation somewhere more useful to him. Naomi, we can fix this. There it was. Not an apology, not accountability, just a vague promise to repair a relationship he had never taken seriously until it started affecting him. How? We talk. Spend more time together. You don't have to leave. I watched him carefully. Do you even like spending time with me? He hesitated for half a second, but it was enough. That's not the point. It is the only point. He looked away, and in that moment I understood something with complete clarity. He didn't want to fix the relationship. He wanted to restore the arrangement that worked for him. The version where I stayed, adjusted, absorbed, and didn't leave. I'm still moving out, I said. When? Saturday. That's 3 days. I know. He stared at me like he was trying to figure out when exactly he had lost control of the situation. The truth was, he hadn't lost it in that conversation. He had lost it slowly, every time he dismissed me, every time he made me feel small, every time he chose convenience over care. This was just the moment he finally noticed. You're really going to regret this, he said. I picked up my phone from the counter. No, I think I already regret staying this long. That was the moment the balance shifted for good. The next morning, he moved into phase 2, control, not yelling, not throwing things, something quieter and more strategic. When I walked into the kitchen, he was already on the phone, pacing like a man with urgent business. I spoke to the landlord, he said. Okay. I told him I don't approve of anyone taking over your half of the lease. I poured coffee, then looked at him. And? He said it doesn't matter what I approve of. That almost made me smile. You already knew that, he said. Yes. You didn't think to tell me? You didn't ask. He muttered something under his breath. You're just replacing yourself like it's nothing. I'm not replacing myself. I'm leaving. Same thing. No, I said, it isn't. That distinction mattered because if I was being replaced, he could still keep himself at the center of the story. But if I was leaving, then this wasn't really about him at all. He crossed his arms. So this guy, Caleb, you've been spending time with him? I've been spending time with friends. You expect me to be okay with some guy moving into our place? Your place, I said, after Saturday. He went quiet. The timeline had become real now. Not abstract, not emotional, real. 3 days, then 2. Then gone. That afternoon, Ethan happened to text in the hiking group chat about the next Sunday trail, and for a second I stared at the message longer than I meant to. Not because of him specifically, but because it was a reminder that life already existed outside this apartment, outside Adrian, outside all the dull tension I had been carrying. I put my phone down without replying, but the feeling stayed with me. That afternoon, Caleb came by to measure the room. Caleb knocked once and stepped inside when I opened the door. Hey, just here to measure the room real quick. Perfect timing, I said. Adrian was already in the living room watching, not saying anything at first, just observing Caleb the way someone sizes up a situation he doesn't trust. Caleb noticed, I'm sure, but he didn't perform back. That was part of what made him effective. He wasn't trying to win anything. Nice place, he said, glancing around. Adrian let out a dry laugh. You might not think that after a week. Caleb looked at him politely. Oh? The hot water's unreliable, Adrian said. The neighbors are loud. The landlord drags his feet on repairs. I leaned against the doorway and folded my arms. Adrian didn't fix things. He complained about them. Caleb, meanwhile, nodded once and said, Good to know. I've dealt with worse. Not some devastating comeback. Just enough to leave Adrian with nowhere to go. The kitchen's tiny, Adrian added. Barely enough room for one person. Caleb glanced toward it. That's fine. I'm not home much during the week. Again, steady, not flashy, just unbothered. You'll see, Adrian said, a little sharper now. Living here isn't as easy as it looks. Caleb gave a small shrug. Most places aren't. That was what made it work. He didn't outshine Adrian. He simply refused to be rattled by him. He moved into what used to be our bedroom and looked around. My stuff would go here? For now, yeah, I said. I'll be out by Saturday. He pulled out a measuring tape and crouched by the wall. Adrian followed us in and leaned on the doorframe like he needed to stay in control of the room. You know she's just doing this to get back at me, right? He said suddenly. There it was, the narrative he wanted everyone to agree to. Caleb straightened and looked at him. Doing what? Leaving, moving you in. Actually, Caleb said, I asked Dante if he knew anyone with a room. Naomi mentioned she was leaving. Timing worked out. Simple, clean, hard to twist. Adrian pressed his lips together. Right. I appreciate the heads up, though, Caleb added. It's always useful to know the vibe walking into a place. That line landed because it gently shifted the spotlight. Adrian wasn't the authority in the room anymore. He was just part of the situation, and not the most stable part. Adrian tried one last angle. Just don't get the wrong idea. She's clearly not over me. For a second, the room went very quiet. Then Caleb gave a short laugh, more surprised than mocking. Man, I have a girlfriend. She's helping me move a few things in on Monday. I watched Adrian's face change in real time. The assumption, the jealousy, the little private narrative he had built for himself all collapsed at once. Oh, he said. Just that. Oh. Caleb nodded and went back to measuring. So, no worries there. That was the end of it. Not with some big victory speech. Just with Adrian realizing he was no longer controlling the meaning of what was happening. After Caleb left, the apartment felt different. Still quiet, but not in the old, suffocating way. This felt more like clarity. You're seriously doing this, Adrian said after a while. It's already in motion. You're moving a stranger into this place. He's not a stranger. He is to me. That's not my responsibility anymore. That word again. Responsibility. The thing he had avoided for months. The thing he suddenly expected from me, now that it was gone. He looked like he wanted to argue, wanted one last angle, one last way to make me hesitate. But for the first time since I had known him, he didn't have one, and I didn't hand him one. Moving day started early because I wanted it clean, quick, and final. I woke before my alarm and lay there for a minute in the dark, listening to the apartment that had once felt like ours, and now felt like something I had already outgrown. There were no second thoughts, just readiness. Boxes were stacked by the door, clothes packed, kitchen items sorted. My life there had been reduced to labeled cardboard and quiet decisions made weeks ago. Adrian was still asleep, or pretending to be. I didn't check. When the movers texted that they were downstairs, I took one last look around the living room and felt something unexpected. Not sadness, relief. Then I opened the door. The first problem arrived 10 minutes later. One of the movers called from the hallway. We've got an issue. I stepped out and saw Adrian's car parked directly behind the truck, blocking it in. Of course. I called him. Your car is blocking the movers. A pause. Then, too casually, I can't find my keys. Of course you can't. I'll look for them. How long? I don't know. I let the silence stretch, then said, Don't worry about it, and hung up. 5 minutes later, I called Dante. What do you need? He asked, already laughing. Backup trucks. 30 minutes later, we were carrying boxes through the back entrance. It was slower and messier, but it worked. And more importantly, it didn't involve Adrian. At one point, he stood by the window and watched the whole thing. He didn't help. He didn't apologize. He just observed, like he was waiting for me to crack. I didn't. Around noon, he tried nostalgia. I was sealing the last box of books when he leaned against the bedroom doorframe and said, Remember when we moved in here? You said it was our fresh start. I remember. I was joking when I said that stuff last month, he said, about it being cheesy. I stood up with the box in my hands and looked at him. Were you? He didn't answer because we both knew the answer. When that didn't work, he tried anger. You're a coward, he said later as I carried another box past the living room. You don't even want to fix anything. You're just running. I set the box down by the door and turned back to him. Real partners don't treat each other like inconveniences. I gave you the best years of my life. I almost smiled. No, you gave me the most dismissive years of yours. That hit him harder than shouting would have, because it was precise. An hour later, just as the apartment was starting to look empty in that strange, echoing way that makes everything feel more final, the door opened and Caleb walked in. Not alone. His girlfriend was with him, carrying a small box and smiling politely, the way people do when they understand a tense situation without needing it spelled out. Hey, Caleb said, we're a little early. Perfect timing, I said. Behind me, I could feel Adrian go still. I didn't need to turn right away to know what he was seeing. Two people working together, moving through a shared task without tension, without contempt, without performance. Something ordinary and healthy. Something we had never really been. Caleb set his box down. You almost done? Just the last few things. Take your time, his girlfriend said. We'll stay out of the way. Simple, respectful, easy. That was when I saw the look on Adrian's face and understood what had finally hit him. Comparison had stopped being abstract. He was watching another dynamic in real time, and it made ours look exactly as bad as it had been. He watched them for a second and muttered, Must be nice. Caleb glanced at him. It is. Not smug, just honest. By the time I carried out the last box, the apartment barely looked like the same place. Empty shelves, bare counters, silence that no longer belonged to us. I went back in one last time to check the bedroom. Nothing left. When I stepped into the living room again, Adrian was waiting. This is stupid, he said quickly. Just stay, we can work it out. There it was again, the same vague promise with nothing real inside it. I looked at him. You don't even like me. That's not true. When's the last time you said something nice to me? He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Nothing came out. That's not fair, he muttered. I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm asking a simple question. He couldn't answer because there was no answer. I didn't mean it, he said finally. What I said about finding someone else. I picked up my keys. But you did. You just didn't think I would listen. I walked past him toward the door and toward the life I had already started building without him. Naomi, he said again, sharper this time. I didn't stop. 2 hours later, my phone started lighting up with messages from him. The dishwasher is leaking. Caleb is playing music. It's annoying. This is all your fault. Why isn't Netflix working? I stared at the screen for a second, then set the phone down and didn't answer. For the first time in a long time, none of it was my problem anymore. I checked my phone later that evening, not because I missed him, but because I was curious how quickly things would start falling apart once I was no longer quietly managing everything. The answer was almost immediately. His messages had escalated. Seriously, Naomi, the dishwasher is flooding. You need to fix this. Why are you ignoring me? Caleb doesn't know what he's doing. I was still looking at that last one when Caleb texted. Caleb, your ex just knocked asking if I know how to fix a dishwasher. I smiled despite myself. Me. And? A few seconds later, Caleb. Fixed it. The seal just needed resetting. Of course it did. Caleb. He thinks you taught me how to do that to make him look bad. That made me laugh out loud. Not because it was funny exactly, but because it was so perfectly Adrian to turn basic competence into a personal attack. Me. That's impressive logic. Caleb. He's having a rough adjustment. That was better and truer than making Caleb sound impossibly cool. He wasn't enjoying a victory lap. He was just observing reality. Me. Sorry you walked into this. Caleb. Temporary arrangement. I'll survive. I put the phone down after that and looked around my new studio apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The quiet there felt different. Not heavy, just open. I could breathe without bracing for criticism. I could take up space without feeling like I had to justify it. The next stage of Adrian's unraveling was social. Dante texted me that night. Dante, just so you know, Adrian's been talking. Me. About what? Dante. Saying you blindsided him. Telling people you were emotionally cheating with Caleb. Also saying you cut him off financially. I leaned back against the couch and read that twice, not because it shocked me, but because it didn't. It was exactly the kind of story a man like Adrian would tell once he realized the practical facts weren't on his side. Me. And? Dante. No one's buying it. That steadied me more than I expected. For so long I had kept quiet to keep things smooth. I thought silence was protecting the relationship. In reality, it had only protected him. Dante. Bianca tried backing him up. Said you were always too sensitive. Me. Shocking. Dante. I reminded them he called your dinners lame in front of people. That memory landed differently coming from someone else. I had minimized it when it happened. Hearing it repeated back to me, plainly, made it sound as bad as it had actually been. Dante also reminded them he said he was too young to be tied down to boring nights in. I closed my eyes for a second. He had said that right in front of me, like I wasn't even there. Me. Thanks for telling me. Dante, always. The next day, Bianca called. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. You broke him, she said immediately. No greeting, no hesitation, straight to accusation. I moved out, I said calmly, like he suggested. He's a mess. That sounds like something he needs to handle. You were supposed to fight for him. I laughed because the idea was almost offensive in its absurdity. Fight for someone who treated me like an inconvenience? You're twisting things. No, I said, I'm remembering them clearly. She tried a softer angle. He loved you. He loved having someone who handled everything. That's not the same thing. That's not fair. Neither was the way he treated me. Silence. Then she reached for the oldest defense in the book. He just doesn't know how to express his feelings. Rolling his eyes and calling me lame expressed them pretty clearly. She hung up after that. That night I sat in my apartment with takeout balanced on my knee, city noise humming softly beyond the window. No tension. No waiting for the next dismissive comment. No feeling that I had to earn gentleness from the person sitting across from me. A few days later, the hiking group chat lit up again. Someone posted photos from the last trail. Ethan replied to one of them with a joke about everybody looking more exhausted in the parking lot than on the mountain. I smiled at the screen longer than I meant to. Then he messaged me directly, just to ask how my move had gone, because apparently Dante had mentioned it in passing. It was a normal question. That was the whole point. No pressure, no weirdness, no performance. Just normal. We exchanged a few messages, then a few more the next day. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It simply felt easy. And after Adrian, easy felt almost suspicious. A couple of days later, Caleb texted again. Caleb, your ex tried to throw a party last night. Me. Let me guess. Disaster? Caleb. 3 people came. He spent most of the night complaining about you. I shook my head and put the phone down. Without me there, Adrian didn't seem to know how to do anything except react to my absence. That was when it really sank in. I wasn't just out of the relationship, I was stepping out of the version of myself that had tolerated it, and I wasn't going back. 2 weeks later, I ran into Adrian. Not intentionally, not in some neat cinematic setup I could have scripted for myself. Just life doing what it does when you finally stop orbiting the same person. It was a Saturday morning at a farmer's market across town, the kind of place I used to suggest we go, and Adrian would call overpriced and pointless. The air smelled like citrus and fresh bread. People moved slowly between stalls, and sunlight lay across everything in that soft, golden way that makes ordinary moments feel like something you should stay inside for a little longer. And for once I did. I was standing beside a produce stall with Ethan, laughing at something he had just said about my inability to choose tomatoes without turning it into a personality test. If you had asked me 3 weeks earlier whether I would be there, holding hands with someone new and feeling that calm, I probably would have said it was too soon. But that's the thing no one tells you. When you've already been grieving a relationship while still inside it, moving on doesn't always feel rushed. Sometimes it feels like finally catching up to yourself. Ethan and I had not planned anything dramatic. We had known each other casually through the hiking group, started talking more after my move, then ended up getting coffee. Then a walk. Then dinner. It unfolded so naturally that by the time I realized I was happy, I already had been for a while. We were comparing 2 baskets of tomatoes when I heard my name. Naomi. I turned and saw Adrian standing there with Bianca beside him, both of them staring like they had walked into something they weren't prepared to see. His eyes went straight to Ethan, then to our hands. I didn't let go. Hi, I said. A long pause followed. Then Adrian asked, You're with someone? He said it like the idea itself offended him. This is Ethan, I said. Ethan, this is Adrian. Ethan gave a small, polite nod. Nice to meet you. Adrian ignored the gesture and kept looking at me. How long? Sorry? How long have you been seeing him? There it was, the accusation hidden inside the question. Officially, about a week? His face tightened instantly. A week? You moved out 2 weeks ago. Yes. And you're already with someone else? Ethan glanced at me, not confused, just taking in the situation. I'm sorry, you are? Her ex, Adrian said. The one I told you about, I added, because there was no point pretending otherwise. Understanding settled across Ethan's face. Oh, the one who said you were boring? Adrian flushed. I never said that. I looked at him. You called my dinners lame. You said your taste had evolved past me. A small silence followed. Then Ethan, in that calm, easy way of his, said, "For the record, her cooking is amazing." That landed harder than a sharper line would have. It wasn't defensive or confrontational. It was just normal appreciation, the kind Adrian had made me feel ridiculous for wanting. Adrian's jaw tightened. "So what is this, a rebound?" Ethan gave a small laugh. "No, I just like being around her. Simple, direct, nothing inflated about it." That was all I had ever wanted. Not perfection, not grand declarations, just to be with someone who liked being with me. Adrian looked between us like he was trying to force the moment into a shape that hurt him less. "This is why you left," he said. "For him." I met his gaze. "No, I left because you told me to find someone else. Ethan was not part of that decision." That was important. I wanted the truth standing there between us without distortion. I did not leave Adrian for another man. I left because the relationship was already hollow. Ethan simply entered my life after I stepped out of it. Bianca crossed her arms. "This is so disrespectful. Parading him around like this?" I looked down at the basket in my hand and then back at her. "We're buying vegetables on a Saturday morning." Ethan smiled. Very aggressive produce shopping. I had to bite back a laugh. Adrian didn't. He was still staring, but the expression on his face had changed. Not anger, not exactly. Something more brittle. The slow realization that I was happier standing in a crowded market with another man than I had been during the last year I spent sharing a home with him. "You planned this," he said quietly. "All of it." I shook my head once. I planned to leave someone who treated me badly. Everything after that happened because my life kept going. That was the truth. And the truth is difficult to fight when it isn't dramatic. No. He exhaled sharply and turned away. Bianca followed him, muttering something under her breath. Neither of them had a closing line worth staying for. Once they disappeared into the crowd, Ethan looked at me and asked, "You okay?" I smiled. "Yeah." And I meant it. We finished shopping, picked out more vegetables than either of us really needed, and cooked together in my apartment that night. He asked questions while I chopped things, not because he was pretending to be interested, but because he actually was. Why did I season it that way? How long had I been making this? What did I cook when I wasn't trying to impress anyone? No sighs, no eye rolls, no performance, just presence. At one point, he laughed at something I said, and I caught my reflection in the dark kitchen window. I looked lighter, like someone who had stopped shrinking to fit inside another person's indifference. Later that night, he sent me a photo he had taken at the market without me noticing. I was mid-laugh, sunlight catching one side of my face. The caption read, "My boring girlfriend buying exciting vegetables." I stared at it for a long second and smiled, because that was what Adrian had never understood. It was never really about the dinners, or the routines, or the quiet little rituals of ordinary life. It was about how those things felt with the right person. The next morning, Dante texted me. "Dante, saw Adrian last night. He looked rough." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. For the first time in a very long time, his life was no longer mine to manage. Adrian had told me to find someone else. He meant it as a threat, a power play, something that would make me stay and beg him to take it back. Instead, it became permission. Permission to remember what it felt like to be wanted, to be valued, to be treated like my presence was a gift instead of a burden. And once I remembered that, there was no version of my life where I went back.